All right. Hi, everyone. This is Jay Pulaki, Chief Gecko at HR Geckos. Hello, Emmeline. Nice to see you here from Tampa, Florida. And welcome to today's really insightful perspective we are bringing to transforming HR service delivery in the small to medium enterprise space. And of course, we bring you today's webinar, which is powered by HR Geckos. And to give you a brief intro of who HR Geckos is and what we're doing, meet HR Geckos, your HR co-pilot. Hi, Ekta. Welcome from New Jersey. HR Geckos is an AI-powered HR operations platform that automates the HR help desk and streamlines HR processes. And of course, it's the home of HR GeckoBot. We are here to automate HR service delivery and connect HR systems to help you focus on what matters most, people. So thank you for joining us today from New Jersey, Tampa. And if you're catching the replay, thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, I am going to bring our three, I would say the three different roles we are playing today is that of an HR tech industry analyst. Albert's playing that role, or he lives that role every day. Anthony Onesto, CPO at Suzy, is in the role of a CPO and a chief people officer and HR practitioner. And he's bringing the perspective of a business leader in the HR domain. And he has a lot of stuff to say because he also hosts something called Burn the Box podcast. Albert is a global HR leadership and human capital and AI consultant. He's the founder of Ignite AI. And of course, he has a lot of insights to share as well today. And yours truly, Jay Pulaki. I'm an HR leader turned technologist in the HR tech space. I've founded HR Geckos right in the midst of the pandemic, and I've been in this space for over 20 plus years, almost 25 years next year. And I also host a podcast called HR Bites Podcast. So that's who we are. And these are the three different perspectives we are bringing to today's conversation. So welcome so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And without further ado, Albert and Anthony, I'd love for you to share one thing that's rocking your world in HR today.
Wow. Go ahead, Albert.
It's age is your beauty, so go ahead.
I appreciate that. One thing that's rocking my world, I mean, in HR is the topic for today, which is AI. We are at a watershed moment right now in so many different ways. I was lucky enough, as Albert pointed out, to be around when the internet, before and after the internet, and how transformational that was. I was also part of the mobile movement, which was transformative, and then iPhone, and now we're at another. And I think because AI is so ubiquitous, like the internet and mobile, that this is an incredible opportunity for HR. And what I'm starting to see and hear, a lot of investors are going, "What are you doing around AI, particularly in your organizations?" And that's going to be filtered down to CEOs. And guess who's going to get the knock on the door? It's either going to be IT or HR. And so it's an opportunity for folks to really jump up and set the standard for what this looks like. So long-winded answer to a very simple question: AI in HR is what really I'm excited about.
Wow. Well, I'm really excited to hear everything you're going to say today, Anthony. And Albert, what's rocking your world?
I think we are entering into an era where human intelligence is amplified and knowledge is democratized. We are living in an era where AI and intelligent technologies are shifting the way how we relate to one another, how we work, and how we deliver value to our customers and services. So that requires an end-to-end view when it comes to human capital, and you start thinking about the role of the CHRO as a main POC to help the C-suite to define that strategy, but also at the same time be responsible to help the organization to prepare for the age of AI. That's what is in multiple conversations that I'm part of, is where organizations are trying to figure out what is the right journey, what's the technology that I need, how can we enable this with change, leadership, and new ways of working, and lastly but not least, how do we make people comfortable?
Wonderful. Well, without further ado, let's dive straight in because I think we have a lot of things to say and I don't want to keep any of us waiting. Um, we have this huge discussion and imagination around chatbots today and AI agents and co-pilots. We keep hearing these terms all the time, but there's a profound difference between an AI agent, a co-pilot, and a chatbot. Can one of you start us off with what you think a chatbot is and should be for HR? And then one of us will dive into AI agents and the other one will dive into co-pilots. So go ahead. Who wants to start first?
I'll jump in there because I actually, before Chat GPT was made available to the world, I actually attempted to create my own HR chatbot called K.AI. And the concept, and I'll start with the concept and then what we tried to accomplish. But in the HR space, you get similar questions from employees on a daily basis. And so it takes a lot of time for a human being to be able to answer questions that could be simply answered by some level of automation. And I saw an opportunity before ChatGPT to automate a lot of that. And so I created and worked on a side gig called K.AI, where essentially you would upload your employee manual into a chatbot experience, and then it would be able to answer questions. Now it seems so easy. When I was doing it, it was freaking hard. And I'll tell you, neural networks, however you want to look at what happens today with ChatGPT, it was a very difficult process because the way and the nuanced way of people asking questions was so different, and the systems weren't available to be able to connect the question to the exact answer. So we had to actually map the question. So for me, a chatbot is something that allows you to get context and information and be able to answer questions for folks. And the simple example of this is, in fact, ChatGPT. That is the most widespread answer. And it doesn't matter what you like. You can have ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic. What happens here is you ask a question and then you get an answer back. In the context of HR, what we were trying to do is employ the knowledge of an employee manual to a chatbot experience that is then deployed to an organization. So at any point, if an employee had a question about anything, policy or otherwise, they would get the answer immediately. They didn't have to wait for an HR, a live human being, to answer that question. They get the answer and go back to their day jobs, right? The whole point was to make sure that they were being productive. So for me, a chatbot is a question and answer system that's based on some context of data or knowledge that it has. And again, some of it, like ChatGPT, is trained on everyone's information, whether you agree with that or not. Or you can actually customize it with a custom GPT where you can actually add data and employee manuals and things like that. So for me, that's a chat. The definition of chatbot is very simple: question and answer.
Wonderful. Albert, next. What do you think is an AI agent, and what do you think it should and shouldn't be doing for HR today?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to expand on Anthony's point of view and experience, for the audience, I'm just going to use an example. So when you think about evolution of technology, there are three main capabilities coming to the human capital industry. Number one is using automation, which is what Anthony was describing. Frequently asked questions. Systems are trained based on a specific data set, and based on that data set, the chatbot will be able to answer questions. If the chatbot doesn't know something, then it will shut down. That's a typical example of automation. Then we moved in the last 10 years and we saw the rise of machine learning, which is a type of AI to be able to make predictions based on current data, right? Data that is available, whether it's structured or unstructured, but available in different systems and repositories. So what is the beauty of it is that these systems are able to learn based on those interactions and make some recommendations, right? So that's one step forward in terms of how these co-pilots are evolving and be able to become smarter and smarter. Then we arrived to November 2022 when ChatGPT was launched by OpenAI. What opened the door for multiple players to be able to create a new category, which is the AI agents. And these AI agents are not the typical chatbot that I was describing. These are the ones that can make decisions, can learn from interactions, make decisions, right? And that's where the market is going. We are going to see a new workforce in the next 2 years when we're going to have agents working alongside with humans and making together decisions. It's very important to understand that as we see the evolution of these agents, there is always a human oversight because these systems don't just work by itself. They need to be trained, they need to be managed and go.
Wonderful. Well, I stand right between the two of you with our co-pilot, which is HR GeckoBot here at HR Geckos, and I definitely have an opinion about it. Co-pilots, so they stand between the chatbots and AI agents in the evolutionary cycle. They assist users in completing tasks while agents actually handle the tasks autonomously, just like what Albert just said. They're automating workflows and making decisions. Whereas chatbots, they primarily engage in like a simple scripted interaction on the data that they're trained on, as Anthony mentioned. So this is definitely a big evolutionary cycle. And for HR, I think we're still at the chatbot stage. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen before we all move to the AI agent. And I feel a co-pilot is a good go-between in the evolutionary cycle of an HR function today. Not that I'm doing a shameless plug of HR Geckos here, but as an HR practitioner for over 25 plus years, I really do believe that we have come a little further than a chatbot, but we are not there yet with the AI agents. But that's my take on it. What's your take on it? Please, comment in the chat and engage with the conversation as we're talking through this really important topic for our HR function today. So moving on, Albert, Anthony, you and I've talked about this prior to today's discussion. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, not in bigger organizations, but in the smaller organizations that look to adopt all of this new technology now that it's economically viable to adopt some of this technology in the smaller to medium enterprise space. How can SMEs effectively integrate generative AI into their HR processes without disrupting any of their existing workflows? And what do you think are some key considerations for ensuring this smooth transition? And Albert, I'll ask you to start first, and then Anthony and I will chime in.
I think we need to take one step. What an AI journey might look like for HR functions, right? So I think it's critical to understand that before you start thinking about Gen AI, you need to have a clear understanding of how are you using AI to increase value. And there are three different ways how you can increase value, whether you are helping the organization to increase sales, reduce costs, or increase productivity and engagement, right? And in order to get there, there are 4 steps that I typically recommend to companies to follow, right? The first step is to start thinking about what's our North Star, what's our vision when it comes to AI and intelligent automation, right? And start thinking about specifically on which are the specific use cases that we want to focus on that will create incremental value, but also allow us to experiment, which will inform the roadmap end-to-end and investments that we make. As you are defining that journey, you're going to start also thinking about what's the level of maturity of your HR function. So think about your operating model, the way how you provide services, talent, new roles, technology, processes. All those components need to be assessed so that you can have a better understanding of the maturity of those, right? And as you are building out that capability, then start thinking about what is the right data and technology architecture, foundational components, niche solution, integrated capabilities that will allow me to prepare for the future of human capital and connecting talent to business value. And lastly, which is critical as well, is to start thinking about how you're going to start experimenting with this and how you're going to prepare the HR function to improve over time, right? So a leading practice on this is start thinking about, let's choose one easy use case, let's pilot it, learn from those mistakes, adjust and scale. That's why I see the implementation of AI across the human capital function, and to a certain point of maturity when it comes to technology, talent, and processes, then you can start thinking about, all right, now we are ready for Gen AI, and here's a strategy that we need to follow.
Absolutely. So I pulled up the slide, Albert, because a visual is always helpful for everyone, including me. And Anthony, I'm going to ask you to chime in as well. When we are assessing HR readiness, I know you've written a little bit about this with the different types of generations we have in the workforce and how we need to adapt and adopt to our workforce when we are designing or adopting new technology. So, can you speak to a little bit about assessing HR readiness and how we are experimenting to improve our HR function of today with whatever tools that we have at our disposal?
That's for me. Just want to make sure. Got it.
Yes.
Sorry. Uh, so, like me, I was not ready. No, I'm teasing. So first of all, love the consulting slide. This is great. Putting things into visuals, so powerful. It often is a little bit different when you're on the ground. Like, this is the ideal scenario, and most of you in HR are probably looking at this going, and I think someone even in the comments commented, like, some folks aren't even at the chatbot stage, and some folks are at an advanced stage. So to me, HR readiness, I have a blog and a newsletter I send out in the same way. Jay threw a shameless plug out there. I'll do one here, AI and HR Today. And what I started doing is looking at the future of what AI and HR look like. And I found what happened was I was too far ahead. I was thinking, a year, 6 months, whatever it was. And I realized my ideal customer profile for the newsletter and HR director wasn't even at the chatbot stage. And so what I started doing is putting together content to build that HR readiness. And there's going to be different dimensions of HR's AI maturity index. But I will say, for the most part, for the folks that I'm talking about or talking to and talking to via the newsletter, folks aren't at the stage one or even at stage zero, aren't even thinking about it because there's just too much risk, especially in the the larger enterprise companies. I think in what we're talking about here, small business and mid-market, there's more appetite to experiment with these things. So I think from an HR readiness perspective, I think you just take a step back, and I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, everything old is new again. There are timeless principles in HR, like task analysis, workforce planning, that we can overlay. So if you want something familiar, those are the two things that you should start doing now. Look at your tasks, go into a job and do a task analysis. You all have done that before. It's standard in the HR space. Then overlay HR. What can be automated? What can't be automated today? What can be done by a chatbot versus an agent versus a co-pilot? Do all that analysis, and you'll get an understanding of what the capabilities are. And then absolutely pilot. Test these things out. I am often, and I'm the worst example of this, ChatGPT came out and I just dove into the deep end. And I was like, what can this thing do? And I pushed it to its edges. I think that's another way. Like, you may not think that something can be automated or something that can be answered via a chatbot. And oftentimes when I'm in a lot of HR groups, whether in Slack or email, and someone will ask a question, and I'll take the question and I'll run it through ChatGPT or Claude, and then I'll give them the answer from that, and I'll basically disclose this is not an Anthony answer here. This is an AI answer, and they're often surprised at how well that the system can do something like that. So HR readiness is, I think we're at stage zero, which again, for some folks is an incredible white space of opportunity. I think from a pilot or experimentation, dive in, just play around with these tools, just test it out and see what the capabilities are. And often you'll be amazed at some of the things that we do and spend time on. These things can do within seconds, and frankly, a little bit better than we can do.
Wonderful. Well, I am ready to talk about how we've been helping some of our clients, especially in the small to medium business space, use something like a pilot, a co-pilot, to kind of build their foundational digital capability for the HR function, and actually bring down the costs. Right. So let me share with you what we've been doing. Basically what we've been trying to do, and Anthony, this speaks to a lot of the stuff that you just covered about HR readiness. How do we take someone who's using paper to be this people first HR function, right? How do we help them transform from being, we call it the gecko transformation here at HR Geckos. How do they transform from being this wild gecko in the wild to the HR gecko? And how do we help them do that, right? We basically help smaller businesses corral all of that, operational touch without losing the human touch, all of the operational chaos, I would say, without losing the human touch. And we provide this modern, simple, agile, customized hub for the HR tech stack. And while we're doing that, we are using AI, of course. I mean, today's AI is evolving so rapidly, as both Albert and Anthony, you've alluded to, that it's very difficult to keep pace for a smaller business with all of the evolution that's happening in with AI in the HR space as well. So what we are doing is we are helping them transition slowly. As you know, there's a lot of Excel spreadsheet use even today, and there's a lot of Google Drive and Google shared document usage in the small business space. How do we help them digitize all of these capabilities and build that foundational digital capability, right? So we're doing it in three ways. We are trying to help them from the employee side of things so that their workforce is more engaged, where HR GeckoBot answers employee queries instantly. And it's accessible on any device, anywhere, anytime. So the accessibility of this tool that we are helping small businesses with is so important today, because it also provides the transparency and provides a transactional history of what's happening. We are actually digitizing the HR service center. So we are keeping the human in the loop, but we are helping employees get self-service. And of course, things like benefits enrollment, and other, leave approval. All of that is also being automated while we're doing this for a smaller business who never thought that they could afford this in the first place, and bring bring organization to the chaos that they've had for years. The other side is, of course, the manager support, right? I mean, the office manager or the HR team of one in smaller businesses really needs the support. And we're doing that by automating workflows, HR workflows like onboarding, for example. We're not just, you know, digitizing a paper form like a PDF and uploading it. We're actually automating the entire workflow and digitizing it and bringing the people and the tools and the processes into one streamlined, you can call it a Lego puzzle, but that's what we're trying to help small businesses with, and streamline all of their ops. And of course, employees and managers, that interaction is always something that has some negativity to it. And we're trying to help them bring a positive spin, where there's a lot of instant access to requests that employees have through our platform, and we call it HR services at the click of a button. And of course, the HR team of one, the HR support that they need to augment that HR team of one or that HR team of three, in a 200 people company, for example. We are digitizing employee handbooks, frequently asked questions libraries that both you and Albert spoke about, which are the crux of the foundation for any of these tools to work, the knowledge base. How do we digitize and organize all of that, right? And of course, the workflows that I alluded to earlier in terms of bringing efficiency to triage employee requests and auto route employee queries at the click of a button, and see the metrics, right? How is the data helping HR in these smaller businesses be that crucial people enabler, be that people first HR function, right? Of course, analytics, you can splice and dice data in so many ways today. And I think HR needs to be using more of this in the smaller business and medium business space. So we are able to help them provide that foundational analytics as well. So this is how we are helping, HR in the small to medium enterprise space kind of corral all of the chaos and build that foundational digital capability. Um, Albert, you and I spoke about how we can build an AI driven people services function. And you definitely have a slide because that's your role here too as the HR tech industry analyst and human capital management consultant. And as you were joking, Anthony and I are not wearing our suit and tie today. So you get to play that role to the utmost. So talk to us a little bit, Albert, about what I have up here on the screen, as well as your thoughts around how should we balance the use of AI in HR and keep that human in the loop, especially in sensitive areas like employee support and conflict resolution.
Yes, thank you, Jay. So I think just take one step back. When we think about the HR function right now, primarily we are doing a lot of things with less resources, and HR plays a huge role to start thinking about how can we leverage operational excellence and operational efficiency and higher scale, be able to provide people services that connect talent to business value, right? And how do we build talent practices that can help the organization to accelerate growth? In addition to that, start thinking about what is the right way to build a sustainable HR function, think about the future of your organization. And with that in mind, we need to start thinking about what is the level of technology capability that we want to bring to HR to enable operational excellence. So I typically, and again, this is like just a very high level view. It's might not applicable to you if you are at a different level of maturity based on what Anthony was describing, but at least give you a foundational view on what are the steps that you need to follow, right? So it's very critical to align you on your North Star. What kind of experience do you want to create? What's the value that you are creating as you are implementing a service delivery model? So think about what just Jay shared with us, right? Typically, HR has to manage a lot of manual work, and sometimes you're not able to connect HR data with business decisions. So having a service delivery is kind of like the first step to start thinking about which are the tasks and activities that you can automate that can start creating some seamless experience for the employees and reduce the time of HR to focus on other activities that can enable the business, right? And the best way to do this is start thinking about, instead of just thinking about the technology, start thinking about what is the human-centric approach? What is the experience that we want to create to shape service delivery services and models, right? So start defining those journeys, identify the connection with process technology and data, which will inform the service delivery model that you want to implement, right? And that will also inform the requirements that you need to put in place so that you can start thinking about what is the foundational HR technology that I need to put in place in order to start thinking or start preparing my HR function for it, right? Define what are those capabilities, how are we going to define different level of layers of data and technology. That's part of the discussion that you need to go through with multiple HR leaders and your business as well. And lastly but not least is, this is what I tell my clients is every technology transformation is a talent transformation. You need to make sure that you prepare the organization for change. You need to upskill people, and you need to make sure that you accelerate adoption. It's just start thinking about the psychological safety for the employees, right? Because the moment you're bringing a new technology, most likely people are going to be like, hey, why do I need to use this? I'm used to do X, Y, Z. What's the role of leadership, role modeling, new ways of working? How are you addressing those components so that your technology capability is bringing value based on the roadmap that you put together for the leadership?
Wonderful. Um, And Anthony, you and I were talking about your chatbot earlier when we first met, right? Um, how can we make sure that whatever technology that we are implementing in our workplaces today within the HR realm of functions, that we essentially make sure that we keep that human in the loop, but at the same time, there are certain areas in HR that don't need the human in the loop, and there are certain sensitive areas that definitely need the human in the loop. Could you speak to some of that's happening in today's HR evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your point is solid in terms of what I've seen in my experience. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you're looking at these things, and I like that you went through the services that HR Gecko can provide, because I think one of the elements that we don't often talk about is the fact that all of this needs to be digitized. AI is not going to work, at least just yet, scanning the real world. Maybe when we have robots and other things, maybe we'll have some of that stuff. But if you're working a lot in paper, absolutely need to make sure these things are digitized. And it seems like HR Gecko is a simple and frictionless way, and hopefully inexpensive to be able to do that thing, because that's a key element. I talk about it more in context. Like, you need all this context to be able to have these things to work. So for me, it's thinking about the things you just don't like doing. There's so many things in HR, and let's all admit, there's probably, I want to say, and I'm going to be conservative here, 50% of the stuff that we're doing, we just we just don't like doing it, right? And the reason is because it's in paper, or I think of benefits administration, I think of payroll, I think of all of these things, by the way, are necessary. They are what I call the plumbing and electricity of HR. If they don't work, everyone gets angry. So you have to make sure they are done perfectly, but they are ripe for automation. They are ripe for digitization, and being able to offload that stuff and be able, like most of us will admit, yes, we want to have that automated. We want that, we want a chat experience or an agent to do those things. Answering questions about what is our PTO policy? What's our Wi-Fi password? I would often get, what's our sick leave policy? These things, by the way, employees want to get the answer quickly, because, Jay talked about, I wrote a book about Gen Z. Gen Z was born with the iPhone and mobile, right? So they know nothing about paper. When you put a piece of paper in front of my children, they're like, what the heck is this thing? So let's be honest, there's stuff that really needs to be digitized and automated. And a lot of that stuff will open up what Jay just talked about and what Albert talked about, the human in the loop stuff, the strategic elements that we've all been really dying to get a seat at the table on, and talk to our CEOs or whoever we're reporting into. That strategic element, to me, once you figure out the plumbing and electricity, which I think is stage one, or maybe even, step one in Albert's slide, once we figure out those things, then you could start thinking about, all right, what are the elements where people need to be involved? But I'll take it even a step further, which is what I do. I think, the human in the loop piece is also where I think AI has an opportunity, is to nudge us on the things that maybe aren't obvious, or nudge our leaders. One of the things we do a lot in HR is we consult our leaders, right? Our managers that work within our organizations. What if there was something that just nudges them to, be on a Zoom and say hi, or ask about someone's day, or, just the human elements of things. So I think to think about the human in a loop, I think AI is also going to make us better people, if you can believe that, because it's going to be nudging us in certain ways. And that's where we get into the agents and the co-pilot. So anyway, I hope I answered your question. I see incredible opportunity to automate what I call the plumbing and electricity of HR, and it will open up the strategic elements, and just, for all of us to be honest, that, hey, actually, there are some people in HR that absolutely love those plumbing and electricity elements, and they're really good at that. So they're going to be fearful of automating and outsourcing that kind of work. And so we have to be careful and help them transition to the more strategic elements that will be available after that. So I think we're at a really incredible time in the HR space.
Absolutely. I used to often joke that I'm the chief plumber and electrician in the HR department sometimes, because, the types of questions we used to get, of course, the repetitive questions like, how do I reset my password? Why is this not working? I'm trying to log into the ATS, but I'm not able to. Can you reset my password? Employees definitely, find that HR seems to be that provider that we've always, that nourisher and provider role that
Right.
played in organizations, and they look to us to definitely clear the clogs in the plumbing. And
Absolutely. And
sometimes,
those
you know,
and those questions are really, really important. For us, it's the third time we've been asked that question today, but for that employee, it's the most important thing, especially when you talk about benefits, which you talked about in one of your slides. Like benefits, like that's very personal. They have children, maybe they're getting denied on certain things. I mean, just, I can go on a whole rant about the whole benefits in medical industry and how it's like different codes confuses people. But at that point in time, that question for that employee is the most important thing. And they are reducing their own productivity by focusing on it and not getting an answer as quickly as possible.
wonderful. That is the perspective that, only a chief plumbing and electrician officer can bring
Changing my title on LinkedIn right now.
to this discussion. But, jokes apart, both of you have been at the forefront of all of these different initiatives that have plagued the HR function for years, and we've all been, either the recipient of the benefits, or I would say, the banes or the boons of all of this new technology that's driving our HR functions today. But there's a lot of analytics that we have failed to harness to show what we do for a business. And I think that there's a great opportunity there today, especially with the support of tools that are Gen AI driven or AI powered co-pilots, to showcase how HR is really that true business partner, not just the plumber or the electrician. What metrics or benchmarks, Albert and Anthony, would you suggest that small to medium businesses use to measure the success of these AI driven HR initiatives that they're trying to put in place today? If you could name your top two metrics, we can then take some audience questions and move along in today's discussion.
I can go first.
Okay.
So I would say there are two main metrics that we could think of. Number one is the level of adoption of the new service delivery model. Right? That will inform, where are the gaps and how can you improve to address those gaps. In addition to that, we'll tell you whether this is a problem on the technology, this is a problem related to culture, processes, and so on. So that's number one. Number two is when you're bringing technology, as I was describing, it's always involved to upskill and start thinking about time. So another metric is around skill evolution or skill proficiency. Do we see any improvement when it comes to AI skills or any digital capability that is enabling the service delivery that we should address? And number three, which is more broader, if you are in a more maturity space, is typically when you invest on AI, you put together a business case and you tell your CEO, your CHRO, whether we're going to increase sales, we're going to reduce costs, or increase productivity. So put in that business case, you tell that team, here's the money that we're going to save, or something else, right? The productivity levels. So always going back to that document and see where are we on that journey so that we can identify and improve for the future.
Absolutely. And Anthony, you were talking about a lot of metrics that you are helping build today in your workplace, right? Especially with, I think you're experimenting with a lot of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. What metrics are you using in real time as you are, putting these AI-driven HR initiatives together at Suzy?
Yeah, I want to plus one to everything Albert just talked about. I think, usage is is a key factor for any tool, and repetitive usage. So not just a one time. I mean, did you just simply log in? We at Suzy, we offer enterprise chat GPT. And so we look at who's accessed it, on a daily basis. We look at those numbers and how frequently do you ask questions? We don't necessarily look at the context, which I think would be really interesting at a high level to get that kind of data, but just simply user statistics. Are people using it? I think that's a key indicator, because anybody who thinks something is of value, you walk into your office in the morning, the first thing you open up is probably your email because it has utility. Same thing here. Is there value that people see in these metrics? I want to go a little bit more advanced, and again, it's just adding on to what Albert said. But I think anything you look at in HR needs to have business metric impact. So if you're using a tool, oftentimes, and I've been running a series called the HR, CEO Whisperer, which is really trying to educate HR folks at all levels at any enterprise on how to talk about the business metrics, how to talk about the business language. And so ROI, which Albert talked about, is a key factor. What are we investing in this thing, and what are we getting out of it? If the thesis is like, if we do this, we're going to answer more HR questions, which means we're going to be more efficient, which means that we can scale headcount without adding HR heads, which again is a metric, right? That is a cost avoidance or a cost reduction metric. And it's and it's an interesting metric from a CEO, from a board, from an investor perspective. On the flip side, again, what Albert talked about is how is it accelerating productivity? Is AI accelerating productivity in our sales? Sales is very linear. Here's sales before AI, here's sales AI after AI, and you could correlate because there's so many other factors, market and other pricing, and there's so many other factors, but you can get a sense of whether this is accelerating performance. Coding, for instance, a lot of our engineers are using Microsoft Copilot for coding. Are we finding them to output code at with less errors than we had before? That's going to be ROI, productivity metrics. That's what the business is going to be talking about. Are we accelerating revenue and productivity? Are we decreasing costs? And that's going to be the way to figure out the ROI on these things. And it should be really easy to figure some of that stuff out. But to me, always end with the business metric in mind. Start with the HR metric, but end with the business metric.
Wonderful. Albert, did you have something to add to that, or do you want me to wrap up with the audience questions?
I would say a call to action, if I may, is number one is start thinking about the experimentation, right? Just experiment with the tool that will inform the way who can you shape your strategy, right? Number two, after you experiment and you get insights from your organization, from your people, then you start thinking about which are the use cases that I should focus on. What is the impact that we're going to create? And Anthony just provide that visibility, right? What's the return on investment? And then lastly but not least, start thinking about, again, is how do we prepare the organization for AI? People are going to be worried about their jobs. Most likely automation is going to take over some activities and tasks. We will need to upskill talent. Most likely we will need to redefine our operating model and of course our service delivery. So how do we put together all these components so that we have a compelling story when we are knocking the door to the CHRO or the C-suite to say, here's the business case, here's the value, and here's the deployment.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the audience connection section. And we do have a question here. Ekta had a question about what you are seeing around I don't know how to say this, but garbage in, garbage out. I hope LinkedIn doesn't dock me for using the word garbage. What are you seeing around this, the garbage in, garbage out AI and Gen AI use with HR data? HR data is really not that, for lack of a better analogy, clean. It's really in disarray today, and it's definitely in need of organization and structure. So what is the perspective that you bring as a CPO and as an industry analyst to that conversation, Albert and Anthony?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to Albert's point of view here, but I think if you wait for perfect data, you're going to be way behind on this. So I wouldn't wait for, perfection. And by the way, we should always strive, even without AI, for HR data to be clean. And I know it's a nirvana we all wish for, um, and not always possible, but this should force us. If we see as AI as not only a cost reducing capability, but also a multiplier on productivity, you're now forced to make sure that the data in is clean, or as clean as it can be. But this is where the human in the loop comes into effect. And I advise in my newsletter and anytime I'm talking about folks getting into AI, very simply, what you don't want to do is go to an AI chatbot and ask it for, hey, I need an internal communication regarding this, and just cut and copy it. No, that's not going to work, because you're going to get some really weird stuff. But instead, you become an editor. You're no longer a writer. You should ever, I'm telling you, as of today, never ever start your own internal communication without AI. I think you're being silly about it. It'll increase your productivity. Absolutely. It'll take an hour. It'll take you now 10 minutes, but don't cut and copy it. You want to edit it, because you do want that human in the loop. Now, I will say over time, the systems will learn and get better, right? So as you're correcting that information, it's going to go back in the loop. And that way, hopefully at some point, you're getting to a point where that human in the loop is not as common as it once was. But absolutely make sure that at the very start of the data that you're putting in and getting clean data. I would start there, making sure that that's set up. I will also say with AI, it does a fantastic job of taking unstructured data, and there's a lot of startups that are working on this. When I say unstructured, I mean like a picture or an image or something like that, and digitizing that and making that make sense. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity where even if you don't have the most structured data, AI is going to be able to make sense of that on its own. But make sure that you have that human in the loop. So if you're producing data or reports, what I love to do is I throw data into ChatGPT, like an employee survey, and I ask it for an executive summary and give me some of the key pointers. Now, I don't just take that and send it to the CEO. I take that, I look at it, and if it's wrong or it's hallucinating, I go back into ChatGPT and say, no, you got that wrong. It should be this, or I'm looking for that. And think of it as an intern. You're going to constantly advise it and coach it. Same thing here with data. You want to make sure that one, it's clean at the beginning, but that you have a human in the loop before you push anything out into the organization or to key stakeholders.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really good cautionary tale that you just relayed, because I see a lot of folks, especially I see my nephew using ChatGPT to do his homework. And I'm going to give you that example because, sometimes I think there is um, I guess, a misconception that this is going to solve all of your ailments in one shot. You got ChatGPT Pro, and it's going to take care of all of your communication, all of your, I don't know, marketing, copy needs, any of that stuff that you've been spending hours and trying to be creative with it is now going to take minutes or less than, maybe seconds. But the cautionary tale that you just spoke to, Anthony, is very, very important to keep in mind, especially with the way in which we communicate with employees in the workplace, or with the way in which we resolve a ticket that came in through a shared service center like HR Geckos. I mean, if we are having a chatbot or a co-pilot or an AI agent answer questions that employees have, we still have to make sure that human touch is paramount, and that people first perspective is paramount when any of these tools are being programmed, right?
I will also say, though, and I'd love to hear from Albert on this, but to your point, if you asked a set of employees in your HR department what your leave policy was, I will guarantee that they will have different answers. With AI, it's going to be it's going to be the same answer. It's pulling from knowledge. So there are some cases where the AI is better. And I want to be clear on that. And I think that's where the opportunity is. And again, we're fearful of AI hallucinating, but if you have your employees answering the questions, there's a chance they're misinterpreting the leave policy, which is often complex and nuanced. So I want to be clear, like anything you talk about here, whether it's humans or AI, there's always going to be risk. Make sure that, there's a knowledgeable person in the loop always.
Absolutely. We do have a question from another audience member here, Gabriel, who's joining us from, I think he said he's from Mexico. So thank you for joining us, Gabriel. And his question is, what are some evolved or superior indicators compared to traditional ones like turnover, training, and employee time off? Like, how do you align with business objectives? What are some newer metrics that you would suggest?
I think we provide some examples. 10 minutes ago, we talked about the return of investment when it comes to productivity. We talk about reduced costs or increased sales. We also talk about adoption, level of adoption, and then start thinking about skill literacy, right? What are the programs that we need to put in place and measure those programs to make additional activities or take action-driven further actions.
Okay. Anthony, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, and I just wrote about this in my blog post. I think, outside of the folks that are still on paper, assume that everything is digitized. We're in now, a lot of companies are remote in office. And so we are leaving, even right now, as this thing is recording and pushing out to LinkedIn, we're leaving a digital breadcrumb in these interactions. That digital breadcrumb is now going to surface so many different elements of human capital that we weren't even aware of. There is I just became an advisor to a company, and what they're looking at is they're taking every digital breadcrumb out of different systems. Your email, there's none of this is new, and you probably know about this already, Gabriel. O&A, organizational network analysis. What it looks at is your metadata of connections across your organization. Who's talking to whom within Slack or email, not looking at the context, but the metadata, who is connecting. And you can start seeing the actual operations. We all have a theory about how our company operates and its culture. This stuff is actually surfacing the real elements of how people are connecting. How frequently is your sales team connecting to your product team? And is there a correlation now if you bring in your Salesforce data and you're seeing that individual is connecting more to the product group and that individual is selling more things, you could potentially with AI make a correlation there, causation, however you want to do it. So I think there's going to be elements of, I think turnover, training, and employee time off are going to be things that we don't even record anymore, because we're seeing that there's very little correlation to the business impact and all of these newer metrics that I don't even know yet. AI is going to be like, hey, did you know this? And I'm going to be like, wow, I didn't know that. And by the way, that actually connects to revenue or productivity. So to answer your question, and it sounds like a cop-out answer, but there are going to be newer metrics that we're going to be looking at, more progressive metrics that we can then really tie, because AI is bringing it to us and saying, hey, did you know that this thing connects to this thing, which eventually connects to business results? So I think we're at a really interesting time around people analytics, frankly.
Absolutely. And Anthony, I just thought of this. I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about the digital breadcrumbs we are probably leaving in a Slack channel or in our HR GeckoBot chat window where we take a break, or we stood up 20 times during a conversation, or we stood up the entire time during conversation. And those little breadcrumbs are being tied into how we perform during the day, during the month, how productive we were during that time period versus another time period where we were just sitting at our desk and not being physically active. So many new ways in looking at productivity, efficiency, and just employee well-being as well, right? I mean, a healthy employee is a healthy workplace, is a healthy world, is what I always say. And to wrap this up, today's discussion has been awesome. Thank you so much for bringing your analyst CPO selves to today's discussion. Albert and Anthony, I'm greatly appreciative of your time. And thank you everyone in the audience who has, had really good comments and engagement throughout our conversation. And definitely, we are always here to talk to you guys, have a discussion. You can reach both Albert, Anthony, and I on LinkedIn anytime. We basically live on LinkedIn. And we are always, talking about AI and HR a lot of the time. And definitely look up Anthony and Albert's resources. They have posted several insightful LinkedIn posts that connect to larger articles and books and other thought leadership around this topic. So, thank you again for joining us today, Albert and Anthony. Have a wonderful rest of your week and
Thank you,
day.
Jay.
I really look forward to learning from you and continuing to learning from you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So, take care and bye bye.
Thank you.